A lonely CEO finds a little girl collapsing at the bus stop. What happened next broke his heart. The rain hammered against the bulletproof windows of the black Mercedes as Marcus Sterling stared blankly at the city lights blurring past. At 52, he commanded a billion-dollar empire, owned penthouses in 3 countries, and had his name etched on buildings across the skyline. Yet sitting in the back of his luxury car, surrounded by the cold glow of his phone screen, displaying another record-breaking quarterly report, he had never felt more alone. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was surrounded by millions of people in this bustling metropolis, yet he might as well have been stranded on a deserted island. If this story touches your heart, please show your support by liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing to Trillionaire in Love. Your engagement helps us bring more inspiring stories to light. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday when fate decided to intervene in the most unexpected way. Marcus had just left another grueling board meeting where decisions worth millions were made with the casualness of ordering coffee. His driver, James, was navigating through the quieter streets of the residential district when something caught Marcus's eye through the rain-streaked window. At a dimly lit bus stop, barely visible under the flickering streetlight, was a small figure huddled against the plastic shelter. "James, stop the car," Marcus commanded, his voice cutting through the silence. "Sir, we're almost at your residence," James replied, glancing in the rear-view mirror with concern. "I said stop the car." There was something about the small silhouette that made Marcus's chest tighten with an emotion he couldn't quite name. As the Mercedes pulled over, Marcus stepped out into the cold rain, his $1,000 shoes splashing through puddles as he approached the bus stop. What he saw made his heart skip a beat. A little girl, no more than 7 or 8 years old, was slumped against the bench, her tiny body shivering uncontrollably. Her clothes were soaked through, her dark hair plastered to her pale face, and her lips had taken on a frightening blue tinge. "Hey, sweetheart," Marcus said softly, kneeling beside her despite the rain soaking through his expensive suit. "Are you okay?" The girl's eyes fluttered open, revealing the most beautiful brown eyes he'd ever seen, though they were dulled by exhaustion and something deeper, a sadness that no child should ever carry. She tried to speak, but only a weak whisper escaped her lips. "Mama," waiting for Mama. Without hesitation, Marcus scooped the fragile child into his arms, feeling how light she was, how her small body seemed to disappear within his embrace. "James, we need to get to the hospital now," he barked as he climbed back into the car, cradling the girl against his chest. During the 15-minute rush to the emergency room, Marcus found himself whispering soothing words to the semi-conscious child, promising her that everything would be okay. Words he hadn't spoken to anyone in years, not even to himself. At the hospital, as doctors and nurses rushed the girl into treatment, Marcus paced the sterile corridors like a man possessed, demanding updates, pulling strings, making calls to ensure she received the best possible care. Dr. Sarah Chen, the attending pediatrician, emerged from the treatment room 3 hours later with a grave expression. "She's stable now, but it was close. Severe hypothermia, dehydration, and malnutrition. Mr. Sterling, this child has been neglected for some time. We've contacted Child Protective Services." The words hit Marcus like physical blows. "What's her name? Where's her family?" "Her name is Isabella Martinez, 7 years old. Her mother." Dr. Chen paused, consulting her chart. "Her mother was found deceased in their apartment 3 days ago. Apparent overdose. The neighbors didn't know about Isabella. She'd been surviving on whatever she could find, waiting for her mother to wake up." Marcus felt his knees nearly buckle. This innocent child had been alone for 3 days, watching over her mother's lifeless body, not understanding that Mama would never wake up again. The image of Isabella's trusting brown eyes haunted him as he stood in that hospital hallway, rain from his soaked clothes forming small puddles at his feet. Over the following weeks, Marcus found himself returning to the hospital every day after work. At first, he told himself it was just to check on her recovery, but deep down, he knew it was something more. Isabella was shy and withdrawn, speaking in whispers when she spoke at all. The trauma counselors explained that she was suffering from severe emotional shock, struggling to process the loss of her mother and the terrifying days that followed. But something magical happened during those hospital visits. As Marcus sat beside Isabella's bed, reading her stories or simply talking about his day, he noticed small changes. The way her eyes would light up when he arrived, how she began to smile when he made silly voices while reading. The afternoon when she finally laughed, a sound so pure and joyful it made Marcus's heart soar in ways no business success ever had. The challenges they faced together were immense. Isabella suffered from nightmares, waking up screaming for her mother. She was terrified of being left alone, clinging to Marcus whenever visiting hours ended. The foster care system was overwhelmed, and the temporary placements weren't working. Isabella would shut down completely whenever separated from Marcus, refusing to eat or speak. Marcus faced his own internal battles. He had never wanted children, had convinced himself that his lifestyle, his demanding career, his emotional walls made him unsuitable for parenthood. Yet here was this broken little girl who seemed to see something in him that he'd forgotten existed. His capacity for love, for sacrifice, for putting someone else's needs before his own. The bureaucratic maze of adoption proceedings seemed designed to defeat them. There were home studies, psychological evaluations, background checks, and countless meetings with social workers who questioned whether a wealthy, single CEO could provide the stable, nurturing environment a traumatized child needed. Marcus found himself fighting harder for Isabella than he'd ever fought for any business deal. "Mr. Sterling," said Mrs. Rodriguez, the stern case worker assigned to Isabella's case, "this child needs consistency, routine, emotional availability. Your lifestyle, the travel, the long hours, the high-stress environment, these aren't conducive to healing a traumatized child." Marcus felt anger flare within him, but then he looked at Isabella, who was coloring quietly in the corner of the social services office, occasionally glancing up at him with worried eyes. She somehow sensed that this conversation would determine their future together. "You're right," Marcus said quietly, surprising everyone in the room, including himself. "My current lifestyle isn't suitable for Isabella. That's why I'm changing it." Over the next several months, Marcus began the most dramatic transformation of his life. He promoted his most trusted VP to handle day-to-day operations, restructured his schedule to work primarily from home, and converted one of his spare bedrooms into a cheerful child's room complete with bookshelves, art supplies, and a window seat overlooking the city park. But the real changes were deeper than logistics. Marcus found himself learning patience as Isabella struggled with basic tasks, her trauma making simple things like sleeping through the night or eating regular meals monumental challenges. He learned gentleness as he held her during panic attacks, whispering the same soothing words over and over until her breathing slowed. He learned unconditional love as he celebrated small victories. The first time she called him Daddy Marcus. The morning she woke up without nightmares. The afternoon she spontaneously hugged him and said, "I love you too." The most profound challenge came 6 months into their journey together. Isabella was finally opening up, beginning to trust, when she suddenly regressed after a particularly vivid nightmare about her mother. She stopped eating, stopped speaking, and spent days curled up in her bed, unreachable behind walls of grief and trauma. Marcus sat beside her bed night after night, sometimes just holding her hand, sometimes telling her stories about his own childhood. Stories he'd never shared with anyone about feeling alone and scared after his own parents' divorce. He told her about the emptiness he'd carried for years, how he'd built walls around his heart to protect himself from pain, and how meeting her had shown him that the very walls meant to protect him had actually been imprisoning him. "I was lost too, Isabella," he whispered one night as she lay still and silent. "I thought having everything meant I was successful, but I had nothing that really mattered. You saved me as much as I'm trying to save you. We can heal together, sweetheart. We can build a new family, just you and me. But I need you to fight alongside me." The breakthrough came gradually. Isabella began to emerge from her cocoon of grief, not because the pain had disappeared, but because she'd found someone willing to sit with her in that pain without trying to fix it or rush her through it. Marcus learned that healing wasn't about erasing the past, but about creating a future worth living despite the scars. 1 year after that rainy night at the bus stop, Marcus stood in a courthouse, Isabella's small hand clasped tightly in his, as a judge officially declared them father and daughter. Isabella wore a yellow dress, her favorite color, and carried a photo of her mother, which Marcus had promised she could always keep and honor. But the real transformation wasn't captured in legal documents. Marcus had discovered that true wealth wasn't measured in stock portfolios or real estate holdings, but in bedtime stories and scraped knees that needed kissing, in parent-teacher conferences and dance recitals, in the simple magic of watching someone you love discover their own strength and joy. Isabella, meanwhile, blossomed into a confident, creative, compassionate child who still carried the sensitivity born from early trauma, but had learned to channel it into empathy for others. She started a small charity project at school, collecting toys for children in foster care, because, as she told Marcus, everyone deserves to feel loved and safe. Their home, once a showplace of expensive furniture and cold perfection, became filled with Isabella's artwork on the refrigerator, toys scattered across Persian rugs, and the constant sound of laughter and conversation. Marcus learned to braid hair, master the intricacies of elementary school math homework, and navigate the complex social dynamics of second-grade friendships. The most beautiful moment came 2 years later, on a warm spring evening as they walked through the park near their home. Isabella suddenly stopped, looked up at Marcus with those same brown eyes that had captured his heart that rainy night, and said, "Daddy, do you think Mama can see how happy we are?" Marcus knelt down to her level, his voice thick with emotion. "I think she can, sweetheart, and I think she's proud of the amazing, strong, kind person you've become. I know I am. Are you happy you found me?" Isabella asked, a question that spoke to her deepest fear, that she was a burden rather than a blessing. Marcus pulled her into a hug that conveyed everything words couldn't express. "Isabella, finding you didn't just make me happy. Finding you made me whole. You taught me what love really means, what family really means, what matters in life. I was the one who was lost. Sweetheart, you found me." The story of Marcus and Isabella became quietly legendary in their community. Marcus, once known only as a ruthless businessman, became an advocate for foster care reform and trauma-informed child therapy. He used his resources and influence to improve the system that had nearly failed Isabella, ensuring that other children wouldn't fall through the cracks. But perhaps the most profound change was in how Marcus approached his business. He began implementing family-friendly policies, creating on-site childcare, offering mental health support for employees, and restructuring the company culture to value human connection alongside profit margins. His employees, initially skeptical of their CEO transformation, found themselves working for a company that genuinely cared about their well-being. Isabella grew up knowing that she was chosen, cherished, and valued not despite her difficult beginning, but as someone whose strength and resilience had actually saved the man who rescued her. She learned that families aren't always born. Sometimes they're built by two people who refuse to give up on each other. Years later, when Isabella graduated as valedictorian of her high school class, she dedicated her speech to "My dad, who taught me that love isn't about finding someone perfect, but about choosing to love someone perfectly." Marcus, sitting in the audience with tears streaming down his face, realized that the scared, lonely little girl he'd found at that bus stop had become the most extraordinary woman he could have ever hoped to call his daughter. The ripple effects of that one rainy night continued to spread. Isabella went on to study social work, specializing in trauma therapy for children. Marcus, now in his 60s, continued to run his company, but never again confused professional success with personal fulfillment. Their story inspired others to open their hearts to adoption, to look beyond their own comfort zones to see who might need their help. On quiet evenings, when Isabella would visit with her own family years later, she and Marcus would sometimes drive past that bus stop where their lives intersected. It looked different now. The city had renovated it, added better lighting, made it safer. But both of them remembered that moment when two lost souls found exactly what they needed in each other. Marcus often reflected on how close they'd both come to missing this life altogether. If he'd been 5 minutes earlier or later, if he'd decided not to stop, if he'd let fear override love during those difficult early months, their entire future would have been different. It reminded him daily that the most important moments in life often come disguised as ordinary evenings, chance encounters, split-second decisions to choose love over fear. Their story stands as a testament to the transformative power of choosing to see beyond our own circumstances, to recognize when we're being called to something greater. It reminds us that sometimes the person we think we're rescuing is actually the one who saves us, that families are built on choice and commitment rather than just biology, and that the courage to open our hearts despite past pain can lead to the most beautiful chapters of our lives. In a world that often feels cold and disconnected, Marcus and Isabella's journey proves that love really can triumph over trauma, that hope can emerge from heartbreak, and that sometimes, on the most ordinary of nights, miracles happen at bus stops in the rain. Thank you for taking this emotional journey with us. If this story moved you, please don't forget to like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear this message of hope. Leave a comment telling us how it affected you. And subscribe to Trillionaire in Love for more inspiring stories that remind us of the power of human connection and unconditional love. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that matter.